Hello everybody, nice to see those smiling faces. So yeah, history of Langwith Lodge, that's what we're going to be talking about. It's going to be a very quick history, so if you need any more information afterwards, just come and ask me, that's absolutely fine. So this is the first drawing that we've seen of Langwith Lodge. Now this isn't the one that was rebuilt in 1902, this is the original Langwith Lodge building built in the 1760s by the Earl Bathurst, so they were the original owners. The original owners of that land was the Pierpont family, which of course are a Nottinghamshire family, so very local. It was a Peter Apsley who bought the land in 1690. He passed away the year after, so it went to his son, also called Peter Apsley, who was Peter Apsley Jr. He died in 1708. He'd never married, he didn't have any children, so it passed to his sister, Catherine Apsley, who married Alan Bathurst, who became the first Earl. So that's how it all fits in together. And here we've got Langwith Lake, which was already there at the time. Earl Bathurst is meant to be showing people one of his nice houses. Initially, this wasn't the main house of the Bathursts because, as Eric said, they come from around Cirencester, so that's where their main house is. This was another house. Supposedly, Alan Bathurst built it for his brother, but he died without children as well, so it reverted back to Alan Bathurst in the 1760s. So we've got Alan on the left, his son Henry in the middle, who's the second Earl, and then the grandson Henry, of course, all called Henry, on the right. So this is probably the main family that have owned Langwith Lodge, which is the Bathursts. So this is Alan Bathurst's will in 1767. The two main parts of this are in bold. So the top part is basically saying he's leaving everything to his eldest son, who became the second Earl. That's the main inheritance. But then you can see in the middle, he talks about estates in Nottinghamshire, Derbyshire and Northamptonshire, and within that, that will include Langwith Lodge. So it's passing down that earldom line from the eldest son to the eldest son. So at this time, the Bathursts wouldn't really live at Langwith Lodge. They owned it, but didn't really live there. So they rented it out to several different tenants over the years. So this is the first one that we can find in 1803. So we've got Harry Back Thornhill, who's involved in the game industry, so hunting, shooting, fishing, because most of the land around Langwith Lodge was deer parks, hunting grounds. So we can see that he was only a tenant, he didn't actually own Langwith Lodge, that was still the Bathursts at that time. So this is a lot of information, I don't expect you to even read all of this, but this is the second Earl Bathurst will. Again, it's going through his children, his eldest son, and it's carrying on down that elder line. So from the first to the fourth Earl Bathursts, it carries on in that main inheritance. So this is another one of the tenants in the 1820s. So we can see what they actually used to do in the newspapers is if any particular wealthy families were visiting a particular place, usually hotels, they'd say who was arriving on a particular week and who was then departing on a particular week. So in that, you can see Langwith Lodge is highlighted, but it's Mr. and Mrs. Art Nassau Sutton have arrived from Langwith Lodge to what's then called Meervart's Hotel. That's it now. Can anyone tell me, do they recognise that hotel now? It's Claridge's in London. So it's exactly the same building, it's just its name changed over time. So at that point, on the 18th of June, what they're basically saying is if you want to know where Mr. Sutton and Mrs. Sutton are, they're at that particular hotel. So we've had the arrival, now having the departure. So again, this will probably be every summer season. So middle of July, you've got again Mr. and Mrs. Sutton, and they're now leaving the same hotel for their seat, Langwith Lodge, Nottinghamshire. So again, these were tenants, they weren't owners, because it was again still the Bathursts that owned Langwith Lodge at the time. So this is Mr. Robert Nassau Sutton, who passed away in 1833. Just a little snippet of his obituary there as well. The main reason he's famous is because he served with that man on the left, who's Mr. Sir Richard Abercrombie, who ended up fighting against Napoleon in Egypt in 1801, so during the very early years of the Napoleonic Wars. He was a captain in the 7th Fusiliers, and he was his aide-de-camp, and that is Mr. Abercrombie being shot at the battle. So it's not actually mentioned if Mr. Sutton is on that, but assuming that he was the aide-de-camp, more than likely he's probably going to be that man or that man there. So we don't have any official portraits or sketches of him, but more than likely he's in that picture somewhere if he's got that role. So this is just looking at Robert's family and how extensive they were, but this is actually through his wife. So it's not the Sutton family, it is his wife's family. So his father-in-law was a lieutenant colonel and an MP for Newark, of course not that far away from here. His uncle-in-law served in the church, which is him there, that's Charles Manners Sutton, who eventually became Archbishop of Canterbury. His son became Viscount Canterbury and Speaker of the House of Commons for 18 years as well. And then another brother served as MP for Newark, Solicitor General and Lord Chancellor of Ireland for 20 years, which is a very long time to hold that post. So the Viscount Canterbury title became extinct in 1941, that doesn't exist anymore, but the Baron Manners title from the younger brother is still around. There are still descendants who hold that title. So very influential family that he's married into.
Where did the Nassau name come from?
No idea. We don't know if it was a popular name, if it came from a military figure. Sounds quite a foreign name, but we don't know exactly where it came from. So this is in 1834. So this is just saying to be let. So again, not owners of the lodge, the Bathurst still own it, but it's just an advertisement. If you want to live here, you can let it out. And again, late residence of Robert Nassau Sutton Esquire. So he'd already passed away the year before, and we can really tell from the 1830s that there wasn't really a big interest for people to move in. It had been lived in periodically, but there was getting to a point where they obviously need to put advertisements in the paper. Someone's not already lined up straight away. They need that advertisement to get people into Langwith Lodge. So this is the 3rd Earl Bathurst's will in 1834. So again, a few months later. And again, because this is from a Nottinghamshire newspaper, again, it talks about Langwith Lodge, which is still unoccupied. So it's been occupied now for just over a year. And it's definitely going to be a drain on the Bathurst finances. There's no one living there. They're not getting the annual rent. So again, they're having to mention in the will, it is still unoccupied if you want to live here. So in 1844, the 4th Earl Bathurst sold it to the man on the left, who's the 4th Duke of Portland. So you've now gone from the Bathurst to the Portlands. So you've got the 4th Duke of Portland on the left, the 5th Duke in the middle, 6th Duke on the right. And they were the 3 Portland Dukes who owned Langwith Lodge. So just after the 4th Duke of Portland bought Langwith Lodge, he moved in a man called Samuel William Need. That was his birth name. He eventually changed his name because of an uncle's inheritance, so he then became Samuel William Wellfit, or as many people would know him as Colonel Wellfit. He was the first major resident there. But again, he didn't own Langwith Lodge. It was still, he was a tenant. So this is just showing you his family very briefly. So Samuel is up near the top, married Letitia Mary Hall, who came from Warsaw, Park Hall, so not very far away. They never had any children. Had a really long marriage, comfortable existence at Langwith Lodge, no children. Another younger brother, Thomas, married, had 1 daughter. She married, no children. So that line's gone as well. Walter married and had 4. And as you can see, Emily and Rachel never married. So their lines have gone. Walter married, no children. So that line's gone. Keeps going, keeps going. Ethel married Francis Archer. They had 5 children. They do still have descendants in Australia. Lucy married William Moore Hodden, had 2 children. Lucy married and got divorced. Very uncommon at the time. No children. William never married either. So again, this family's really getting quite small. Fanny Need, not the best name to have, I don't think, married Robert Gill, had 5 children. Frederica never married. Mary never married. Madeline never married. Eleanor never married. Robert did get married. Way, get married. Had 4 children. Theodora never got married. Madeline did get married. No children. Catherine never married. And Robert never married. So the only line that's left is that one. All the rest of them have now died out. That's very, very common in these middle-class families. So this is 1844, so this is literally, Colonel Welfit has just moved in. But he's not called S.W. Welfit, he's called S.W. Need, because this is just before he had to change his name. And again, it says, off Langwith Lodge. Basically what that says is he was riding in Clumber Park and he fell off his horse. Managed to survive, no injuries, but the main thing is that he was still known as S.W. Need. 6 months later, this is from the Queen, this is an official statement from the Queen, has been pleased to grant unto Samuel William Need of Langwith Lodge, blah, 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 grandson of William Welfit, who was Doctor of Divinity, so a vicar. Senior Prebendary at Canterbury, Rector of Haslingay, Vicar of Elmstead, both of Kent, blah, 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 blah. But it's that uncle, William Welfit, who, no surprise, never married, never had any children. Not a surprise. So in the will, William said, Samuel can only inherit what I've got if you take on my surname. So Samuel's mum was Mary Welfit, so William's his uncle. So again, that's why he became known as Colonel Welfit, and that's the proof of it that we've got. So this is, again, some of the family members. So we've got Samuel, we've got his brothers, we've got nieces and nephews. It's the amount of money that these people were leaving at the time. So Samuel left what would today be worth 15.5 million. His wife left just over 7 million. His younger brother left 2.5 million. But then you've got nieces such as Emily, Rachel, Frederica, Eleanor. They're leaving £2 million. The reason why they didn't marry is because they didn't need to. Most women at the time were forced to get married because they didn't have any money. The husband never marry. All of them are pretty much well off as it is. So they never had a job, they never worked, but they had their own houses and they could simply live on their own with what they've got. So that's why none of them ever married, because they didn't need to. So now we're getting into the census era. So we've got 1851. So again, Langwith Lodge at the top, Samuel William Welfit with the magistrate, so exactly the same, with Letitia, who's his wife, and then you've got Letitia Hall. Letitia Hall is the mother-in-law. The dreaded mother-in-law is living with him. So she's 68, so she's a general's widow. And then you've got all those servants, which is typical of the time. 10 years later, S.W. Welfit, Letitia, his wife, is still there. And guess what? We've still got the dreaded mother-in-law. She's still there. She's 77. She's hanging on. She's hanging in there. But then you've got the butler, the footman, the groom, the housekeeper, typical servants that these people would have had. Now, this is the sad bit, unfortunately. That's Letitia Hall, the mother-in-law, died at 87 years old. And that's in 1870. So she died at Langwith Lodge. So she was there for a long time as well. So then by 1871, the mother-in-law is no longer there. But we've got Colonel Welfit, his wife, and a cousin who's an artist. And then, of course, we've got those domestic servants as well. So that's why Letitia Hall isn't on there. 1881, still there. So they've been there for nearly 40 years now. So it's a very extended period of time. So again, Colonel Welfit, his wife, and the servants. That's it. It's pretty much the two of them together with the servants. If you wanted to know what Colonel and Mrs Welfit look like. Ta-da! There you go. So obviously the Colonel's on the left and Mrs Welfit's on the right. That was probably done in London at probably one of the very famous photography studios. It just tells you a lot about these people by the way that he's standing, the way that he's dressed. He's definitely a country gentleman. He doesn't live in a city. You can tell that from these pictures. So 1889, after 45 years, that were good, 45 years of living at Langwith Lodge, Colonel Welfit's passed away. So he was in his 80s as well, and you won't be able to read all this, but there's a lot of these names that you'll know. So Thomas Need, Walter Need, brothers, Mrs Hodder is a sister, Mrs Gill is another sister. So another reason why the women didn't marry was because if you had an unmarried aunt or uncle, it'll just go to the nieces and nephews. So probably every few years they'll get a nice top up from Auntie Lizzie somewhere. You might get £500,000. But it literally goes all the way out to the surviving siblings and the nieces and nephews. That's the will that's been proved. So Colonel Welfit is there, and his was 95,000, which is what it's worth. It's 15 million today, but it was 95,000 back then, which of course even today is a lot of money, definitely a lot of money. I wouldn't mind having it. So this is 1891. So obviously Colonel Welfit's passed away 2 years before, but his widow is still there. So Letitia's still there, 78 years old, and she's there on her own. There's siblings around, there's nieces and nephews, but they don't really live in Langwith. They live in similar areas, but not round here. So all you've got is a 78-year-old lady living off her own means, not a surprise if you live with £7 million, and then all these domestic servants as well. Some of these names you do see cropping up year after year after year. They will stay with the same family, they will stay with the same employer. 1899, Mrs Welfit passes away. So she's there on her own for 10 years. So she's there for over 50 years. So an incredibly long time to stay in the same house. And again, most of these names you will see are familiar, but people that were tendered, there was a large attendance, and wreaths were sent by the Duke and Duchess of Portland, who of course are her landlords still. Mr Hall of Park Hall, that's her nephew, because of course she was born at Park Hall. Mr and Mrs T Warner Turner, that name will crop up in a minute as well. And you've got places for Lady Fitzherbert, Nettleworth Manor. She knew a lot of very influential people at the time. So this is in 1900. So this is an advertisement in the Derbyshire Times. And this is to sell the furnishing contents of Langwith Lodge. Because again, she didn't own the lodge. She simply rented it out. So it's the furnishing contents of the above residence, also the carriages, harnesses, etc. A library of about 2,000 books and contents for 16 bed and dressing rooms. That's how big it was. And again, that's why they've got plenty of money around as well. So this is in 1902. Now I've heard mention of the fire that apparently started 1900, 1901. I've not found any evidence of a fire. Nowhere. As you can see, there's plenty of newspapers talking about the Welbeck Tenants Agricultural Society. Surely if there was a fire, it would be mentioned in a newspaper. Whether it's the Derbyshire Times, Worksop Herald, the Echo, it would be mentioned. There is no mention of a fire. I personally believe that that was an excuse by the Dukes of Portland, who was then the 6th Duke of Portland, to say, rip it down. We need an excuse. There might have been a fire, a very small fire, but then that's the excuse of it's old, it's built in the 1760s, it's not economical anymore. Let's rip it down and rebuild it. So that's what I think happened. So again, 1902, so a few years later, this from now on is the modern Langwith Lodge that is there. So we've been with the old lodge, now this is the current one that you can still see. So these are all the judges at the bottom, and one of the committee members is T.W. Turner of Langwith Lodge. You can remember from Mrs Welfit's will, a Thomas Warner Turner was in residence and he attended the funeral. That's because Thomas Warner Turner was the land agent to the Duke of Portland. So we think another reason why they demolished the old lodge and built the new one was to house the land agents. And Thomas Warner Turner is the first one. So this is in 1917. So people will know of this if you've lived in the area, about the 5 youths that drowned in the lake. This is just one example of those newspapers. But the main thing is that it says 5 bright young lives were lost through ice giving way on the lake in front of Langwith Lodge, the residence of T. Warner Turner. That's all I'm bothered about for this. If I was doing it on accidents, I'd go way more into this. But we now know that by 1917, Langwith Lodge was the residence of Mr. T. Warner Turner. So he's been there for at least 15 years already. So this is the 1911 census. So you've got Thomas Warner Turner at the top, his wife Helen, several children, and then of course servants as well. Now he was born in Kilmarnock in Scotland, and you'll see in a minute that his father was a land agent for the Duke of Portland for his estates up in Scotland. So again, there's that familial connection between the two families. So we'll just look a bit at his family tree. So again, Frederick John Turner is Thomas Warner Turner's father, land agent up in Scotland, married for the first time, had 7 children, married for the second time, had another 8. So quite a lot. But if we look at these names, you've got Frederick, who was a sailor, Eliza, private means. That basically means never worked. She stayed at home. Joseph was a land agent. Thomas was a land agent, we already know. Harry served in the Boer War. We've got a solicitor. We've got a nurse. Private means, again, for Caroline. Mining engineer, land agent again. Farmer, soldier, nurse. Association of Ceylon, so again, that's now Sri Lanka. And another one married a tea planter. So again, you can see these daughters and these men are influential, wealthy, middle-class families. So this is Thomas's actual descendants. So we've got his 4 children. Bit different to the Welfits in that there are descendants still of Thomas Warner Turner. I've only gone down to his grandchildren because if I go down any further, we're talking with living people. So I don't want, obviously, people saying, oh, you're his great-grandson. So he's got descendants, which is the key difference compared with the old nobility where they don't need to marry and have children. These are marrying, having children and having descendants today. Apart from Philip, of course, there's got to be one. Married, no children. Of course, there's got to be one somewhere. So this is talking about Thomas Warner Turner's involvement in the railway. So, of course, this is around the time of the munitions factory, slightly before, but he became the director of Mansfield Railway Company. So, again, very influential in the local area as well. So here we've got his death in 1939. So that's the one that's quite brown up at the top and this one here. And then we've got his wife's death in 1952. But by 1939, he wasn't living there. It had already been taken on by somebody else. But he lived at Cutney House in Cutney. So again, he's remained very local to Langwith, to the area, to the Portlands as well. And it was actually attended by the Marquis and Marchioness of Titchfield. So very influential people attending his funeral. So this is in 1919. So again, it's another sign, bearing in mind, it's still being rented out. It's not owned by these people. It's still owned by the Portlands. So this is Langwith Lodge and grounds to let. The person you have to see is Mr. T. Warner Turner, who of course is the land agent. So again, T. Warner Turner's now moved out. He's now gone to Cutney, and they're now looking for someone else to let the house. So by 1921, we've got the Longbothams. So we've got Herbert and his wife Muriel and their descendants. The difference is that Herbert Longbotham owns Langwith Lodge. They put it for let, no one gets it, so they decide we'll sell it. So in 1920, Herbert Ashley Longbotham and his wife buy Langwith Lodge. So by this point, we're now dealing with owners, not tenants, owners. They didn't stay there for very long. They only stayed there for about 3 years because in 1923, they decided, I think we're going to go to retire somewhere. We've done 40 years of work. We'll now go and retire somewhere else. So we'll sell Langwith Lodge and we'll move away somewhere. But of course, because they were very influential in Langwith, everybody came out to say, cheerio, goodbye, thank you for employing us, thank you very much. So they only stayed there for about 3 years, not very long. Where did they end up? I'll tell you that in a second. But Herbert Asher Longbotham's family tree, and again, you can see similar. Elder brother Charles never married. Jonathan got killed during the Boer War. Constance was put in a mental asylum. Hugh married, had one daughter. George never married. Bessie also ended up in a mental asylum. And Edith, no children. So again, it's quite a small family, a bit similar to the Welfits. So he ended up going to Bournemouth. Lovely Bournemouth on the south coast. So he died in 1938. And it is somewhere, died at Bournemouth, only 57, so not particularly old, especially for these times as well. Talks about his events, his father working in Sheffield and different places, so that's probably why he ended up at Langwith, because his family originated from Sheffield, so that's probably why. So this is in 1935, so we're talking quite a few years later, and this is talking about pollution in the stream. And now Nether Langwith Council have got to make a decision about what to do about it. And one of the people on the council was a Mr. W.H. Davis of Langwith Lodge, who was a builder. And this is where we're getting to the period where people will start to know these people. You might remember the names, who they used to be like and different things. And usually it's Mr. Davis who people seem to remember. He's the earliest person that people seem to remember. Same thing again. So this is in 1951. So he bought it off Mr. Longbotham in 1923. So he was there for 29 years. So again, an incredibly long time he was in Langwith Lodge. And now he's selling it on himself in 1951. And he even puts it in Country Life, as you do. That's the place to do it. Beautiful country house with grounds and park, of giant trees, forest trees, gardener's cottage, 2 entrance lodges, total area about 54 acres, quite a lot of land that's going to go with it. So we now definitely know Mr. Davis is deciding to leave.
Any idea of price?
No, not at that time. There is one later on, but not at this time. Unfortunately, I've tried looking for it. So this is Mr. Davis. People going, yeah, remember him. So here we've got him with his wife, Ethel, and their 6 children. Again, some of these, especially the grandchildren, are still alive. But again, you've got a sense of no descendants because Barbara married, no children. Derek married, no children. Jean married, no children. Pamela married 3 times, no children. But he has got 5 grandchildren. 1 passed away last year, but you've still got another 4 who are still alive. So again, really modern day families. So this is in 1952. So again, Mr. Davis has now sold it to a Mr. Landrick, and it's now being run as Langwith Lodge Maternity Home, which a lot of people don't know. They know about it, but not too much about it. This is the only time it's on these successive weeks, which is why I put all 3 on. It's mentioned as a maternity home. There's no other mention in any newspaper of Langwith Lodge being a maternity home. It wasn't there for very long. It was functioning successfully, but it wasn't there for a long period of time. So this is Mr. Davis's obituary, 1954. So again, he didn't really last that long after. North Clifton, which is near Bristol. So there's quite a few different Cliftons around in the country, but this is the one in Bristol. Again, we could go all into that about who was at the funeral, who was there, but it does say Mr. and Mrs. Davis returned to North Clifton Hall after living for 30 years at Langwith Lodge. So again, it's reaffirming that sense he's been there for 30 years. So this is not what you'd expect to be looking at. So this is in 1955. So a Lieutenant Colonel Hanbury, who now lives at Burley-on-the-Hill Hall, wants to move back into his hall. So during the Second World War, it was used as a diabetic hospital, and he moved into the vicarage. Now it's 10 years after the war's ended, he's decided, I want to move back in. Can I have my hall back, please? So what they've decided is they're going to shut Burley Hall, but they need to find a different place for this diabetic centre. And it does say on there, when the lease expires at the end of June, the hospital will be closed and the patients will be moved to Langwith Lodge. So it's mainly that reason why Langwith Lodge becomes the convalescent home. That's definitely one of the main factors involved. And you've got Dr. Joan Walker at the bottom. She moves with the patient, so she ends up living in Langwith for quite a long time, and she ends up settling in Langwith as well. So it's opened in 1955 as a diabetic centre for men only. Female patients aren't allowed to be admitted. It takes until 1958 for them to say, we will now be admitting female patients as well. So that's just a mass, because people always say, oh, it was for both genders. Actually, technically, it wasn't. It was only for men. Then it moved to men and women as well. But it took 3 years. This is it opening officially, 1955. So again, it's accommodation for 20 patients, but it can extend to 30. So again, they're trying to use it in a different way. Again, it's moved because of Burley. We talk about the Duke of Portland. It became home with the Davises, then as a private maternity home. So you can see this timeline going through. But from 1955 onwards, it's now the diabetic convalescent home. So this is in 1958 when they're allowed to get their own television. They're not borrowing the staff's TV in the staff room. They're allowed now to have their own television for the first time. So this is when we start seeing the League of Friends of Mansfield Hospitals group. So they mainly focused on Kingsmill Hospital, but there was a small group of volunteers who also helped out at Langwith Lodge as well. And it's mainly through funds, through different events, garden parties, different things that they're getting funding for, things such as television sets. So 1955, the newest outlay of 25,000 for the buying and conversion of Langwith Lodge. And again, they've produced a booklet talking about diabetes, how it can function in the home. Mainly what this was for people who have just been diagnosed with diabetes to come into an area where they can learn how to treat it, how to deal with insulin, how to deal with needles, and then to go home and then you know what to do with diabetes. So it wasn't really meant for permanent residents. You were meant to be popping in and out over time. So again, garden party in 1959 raised £350. They do start doing specific training courses at Langwith Lodge for diabetic nurses as well. So again, they'd be housed there. People would be able to learn specific diabetic training, and then they would go to their own hospitals and do these skills as well. So this is in 1968 when they actually made a hospital film about diabetes. Because again, unless you had someone who had diabetes, it wasn't really talked about very much. So this was a publicity video done by the group to advocate for diabetes, the training that they do, different things with insulin and needles, how to do it securely and safely. So again, it's advocating for community care as well. Just a little thing that I wanted to include. So this isn't nothing like what Eric said about 78-foot drop. A small lad was getting out of his parents' car, he tripped on the ledge and he grazed his knee. So it's not as bad, but I just thought I'll include a little bit in there about a 4-year-old boy who fell out of his parents' car. Not as bad though, thank goodness. So now we've got these outings that have been arranged. So again, the League of Friends have allocated a further £150, so again, through further fundraising. And they're now going to the seaside, they're going on different trips. They had their own shop in the grounds. They used to sell postcards. We've got some on the table that they used to sell and different things. So you can tell it's definitely a community. Yes, it's run by the NHS, but funding is pretty much needed all the time for special treats like this. More things, obsessed with televisions, obsessed with them. First in black and white, then they're going into colour. As you can see, 74, television sets, 78, colour television sets, woohoo. So again, it's the main thing of improving the lives of the patients while they're there. Then we get this. So June 1979, a certain lady has just become Prime Minister. We all know who it is. I'm not going to say her name. But it's decided that there needs to be cutbacks in the health service. And one of them includes the closure of Langwith Lodge. Now, it's keeping this in mind, this is 1979. Just keep that date in mind and see how long it takes them to actually close Langwith Lodge, because it's not quick. So later in the year, new ideas to save money, we will close Langwith Lodge. That is our main purpose. So it's already been 6 months and it's still open. 1982, they've been consulted by the Central Notts Health Authority of plans to close Langwith Lodge. Has it been closed yet? No. So we're now on 3rd year and it's still not closed. 1983, to close. Langwith Lodge is to close, but not until Kingsmilk and Cope. So that's 1983. Still not closed. 1984, would you like to do a course on diabetes? If you do, come to Langwith Lodge, which is still open. So we're talking now 5 years. 1985, Langwith Lodge is still there. It's still being run as a convalescent home. So we're now on year 6 and it's still there. 1986, again, closures envisaged. Other closures. Kingsmill, 30-bed Langwith Lodge is due to close in 1987 to 88, with detailed plans for a district diabetic service still to be drawn up. So they've now had 7 years and they've still not sorted it out, but it's still functioning. 1988, it's eventually been decided that Langwith Lodge is definitely going to close. So it's just took just under 9 years from them saying it's going to close until they're saying, right, this is serious now, it is definitely going to close. The new diabetic centre opened at Kingsmill. So again, like the Burley Hall that moved to Langwith, now it's moved to Kingsmill. So this is definitely the point where Langwith Lodge as a diabetic centre is on its last legs. It's not going to last much longer. Then we get Ernest Wakefield, who talks about every single thing about Langwith Lodge. As you can probably gather, he doesn't want it to close. And he does go on quite a bit of a rant about saying it shouldn't close, we shouldn't close, it needs to be kept open, please don't close it, I really don't want you to close it, look at the history of it, look at this, look at this. Do you think they listened to him? No. As by August, it's now up for sale. And this is the point where I can tell you how much it was sold for. £620,000 in 1988. So now diabetic centre's gone and they decide to put in planning permission. This is the first one. So to raise the roof of the outbuildings and to construct 2-storey rear extension and demolish the outbuildings. So clearly they're using it for a particular purpose. October is the first time you get in a newspaper Langwith Lodge nursing home, which of course what it is now. So we can see that you've got hydraulic lifts to all the floors, you've got fully automated fire alarms, individual nurse call. They're really trying to sell it as a nursing home. So some of these names you might know, but these are some of the first residents of Langwith Lodge. Probably one, if you've lived in Langwith for a long time, is G. Saint, who was the headmaster at the primary school for about 30 years. But these are starting to see obituaries of the first residents. So again, from now on, it is a nursing home. Then in 1991, they put in another planning application. So this is the conversion of existing stables into sheltered accommodation. Basically, they want more beds. That's basically what it says. Then in 1998, it's put up for sale again. Still as a functioning nursing home, registered for 66 patients, compared with 30 when it was a diabetic home. So clearly those two extensions are for adding more beds to Langwith Lodge. So that is just a very basic timeline of Langwith Lodge. Again, you won't remember all of it, I can assure you, because I can't remember a lot of it, especially when this is done. But again, 1690, you get the Apsleys, Bathurst, Portlands, Longbotham, Davis, maternity home, diabetic home, nursing home, until today. Thank you very much.